残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になって青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても私だけを見つめて微笑んでるあなたそっと触れるのも求めることに夢中で運命さえ私じゃない痛いけな瞳だけどいつか気づくでしょうその背中には遥か未来目指すための羽があること残酷な天使の手で窓辺輝がて飛び立つほとばしる熱いパトスで思い出を裏切るなどこの空を抱いて輝く少年よ神話になれ
So you're back. I knew you wouldn't simply be content with a blue pill from that earlier Matrix reference, because nobody likes cliffhangers. Or maybe you already know the ending, but just like my humorous retelling of it, and want to hear the rest of that. Well, alright, I'll tell you the rest of the story, but from here on out the plot gets very convoluted and ridiculous. Don't say I didn't warn you. If you're watching this video for the first time and you haven't seen the first one, then go back and watch that one, because you're not supposed to start these things in the middle, you idiot. Anyway, this is how the video will be structured. Reddit user Icy Shake posted a great summary that's super detailed and isn't trying to be snarky. It will take us through the end of the book, but it doesn't start until chapter 37. We left off at chapter 33, so I'll just fill in the gap with what I know. Remember how Blackjack died in chapter 33? Obviously her death couldn't stay permanent because she's the main character, so her friends take her to Ten Pony Tower where she gets brought back to life as a cyborg. The Twilight Society gives her a free spell book because she's a descendant of Twilight Sparkle. Then Somber takes advantage of the gap in Little Pip's memory from Fallout Equestria by having Blackjack meet Little Pip. They already met earlier in the story, but this time they have an adventure together that involves riding alicorns and shit. They come back to Ten Pony, have a lesbian foursome with Homage and Glory, then she says goodbye and takes her gang back to Hoofington. Sanguine still thinks she's dead, and he's getting desperate to find EC-1101, so he destroys a bunch of settlements that Blackjack visited earlier. Also, we learn that by firing Trot and Hemus Folly on the HMS Celestia, Blackjack accidentally awakens something in the Hoofington core. That brings us up to chapter 37. The following was all written by Icy Shake as part of a request to summarize the rest of the story's plot, and I think Icy did a pretty good job on it. Okay, this is all off the top of my head, so some details might be wrong. And given that it's been compressed over 99%, some salient points are omitted, especially where backstory is concerned. Chapter 37 should put you in Hippocratic research. While there, Blackjack makes a deal with Sanguine to free and restore his family from their stasis pods, which was one of his 3 or so big motivating drives, or at least he thought so, while they get new lungs for Scotch to replace her joked ones which were producing chlorine, and new skin for Blackjack. In each case, that required the creation of a whole flux clone from a tree of life. Sanguine, upon being rejected by his revived family who end up getting disintegrated by robots, goes feral and they have to just leave him. Blackjack ends up learning that Project Chimera was based on extracting taint from Discord, which was then sold as Flux, to be used in a bunch of things including as the basis for IMP. She frees Discord, who helps her, and her friends escape the robot invasion of Hippocratic. They rejoin Glory and Scotch at the Fluttershy Medical Center, where Scotch gets a lung transplant, but only after its success is threatened by P-21 having stolen the Med-X Glory was going to use to anesthetize Scotch tape. Lots of anger there, but that's how they all learn that he's been hiding a lifelong addiction the whole time they've been traveling together. Most of the group leaves for Chapel so Scotch can recover and P21 detox, but Blackjack breaks off from them, ostensibly to keep the Harbingers from being interested in them, but really more because she's dealing with a ton of issues, notably some fresh and pronounced PTSD over the seahorse, which results in her violently lashing out whenever a stallion expresses sexual interest in her or touches her in a way suggestive of that, and can't handle not moving and doing things to distract from them. She meets up with a few gangers and a Highlander, deals with some Harbingers, and then she and Bluebell, the Highlander, go to the Yellow River Detention Center, where they saw Enclave fighting zebras, and wanted to break it up or something. After being captured and escaping, Blackjack learns that there'd been an epidemic of the raider disease at Yellow River, and its director, a Pegasus named Mephitis, ran off when the bombs started falling, leaving the inmates to die. Turns out as well there'd been a very hard to kill predator temporarily held there, which was why the zebras had been checking the place out, while the Enclave were there about the disease. A zebra technician, Zan, who Blackjack meets, says she can never return to her people because the Maiden of Stars, Blackjack, cursed her by saving her life, or touching her or something. To get out of the facility, Blackjack goes on a rampage, killing at least half a dozen Enclave before just stopping herself from killing Laura's sister Dusk, whom she remands to the custody of some of the Thunderhead Enclave she'd met before, Twister, Boomer, and Sunset, to take to get medical attention. Then the narrative breaks for a while as Blackjack wakes up in a wartime psychiatric facility as a patient being treated for wartime stress disorder, but still seeing flashes of things from the wasteland. Over time, she figures out what she's seeing isn't real, and that she's hooked into the computers at the Happy Horn Psychiatric Hospital in real life. It's under attack by the Harbingers, and she needs to convince it she's cured, or at least can acknowledge what caused her to commit herself, and it can release her before they find and kill her, or destroy all of the computers and she's trapped. It ends up working well enough, and she gets out just in time, having accepted that in her flight, she'd accidentally killed a few scavengers, including Boeing, one of the original Crusaders she'd met on first leaving 99. A Harbinger enters her room, and on seeing her, tells the rest that he saw her go down the hall, giving her the chance to slip out later. After leaving Happy Horn, Blackjack wanders around for a while, and takes a break in a hot spring, where she meets Stygius, a bad pony stallion who has the hots for her. She agrees to let him come with her, and they stumble upon Goldenblood and Fluttershy's cottage. There, she learns about the violent annihilation reaction between Star Metal and Moonstone, about Goldenblood and Fluttershy's breakup and her treason, and Fluttershy's miscarriage, including that Goldenblood had meant to name their daughter Whisper. Also, Blackjack and Stygius have sex, with her goal being to try to get over being triggered by sex with males and anything suggestive of it. Then the Harbingers and Steel Rain arrive, and Blackjack sends a broadcast saying she needs help. Locuni teleports in with Psycho Shy and Rampage, who help Blackjack and Stygius survive this confrontation and escape. I believe it's after that point that Blackjack makes her broadcast saying she was alright, and bringing up Stygius as a champion in bed. Group needs to follow EC-1101's routing, which calls for them to go to Hightower Prison, but it's going to be hard, and they should get help and advice first. So Psycho Shy directs them to meet Locker, a ghoul community near the prison, where they could ask around, stock up, and so forth. They get a team together, including Zan, who had brought in a heavily injured Boeing. Turns out she wasn't dead after all. Hightower is a death trap, but along the way Psycho Shy starts showing interest in Stygius and Blackjack learns more about Project Eternity, which was basically Rarity's plan for first making indestructible armor out of soul jars for her friends, then the Phoenix Talisman, a soul jar regeneration talisman meant to restore its user from anything, and ultimately dropping that, but not before losing the talisman at least twice, in favor of the statuettes. In this, she was assisted by Snips and Snails. Snips, it turns out, was one of the people who had joined up with the group for this raid, in order to get Snails out of Hightower, where he'd been trapped. Blackjack also learns more about Deus's history between being arrested for aping Twist, and being a test subject for Project Steel Pony. He'd been in prison at Hightower and had over time degenerated from trying to protect some of the weaker inmates there to being one of the antagonists, which happened in parallel to his being abandoned by his old friends in the Marauders and rebuffed and even getting a chance to apologize to Twist. They get what they need out of Hightower. Finding EC-1101's next routing point is at the top of Shadowbolt Tower. Snails is rescued, but along the way, Snips sacrifices himself, and Blackjack was put under a curse which was slowly tearing out her soul, which was completed soon after the Balefire missile lodged in the prison went off. Blackjack's soul experiences a hellish cyclone of souls, at the center of which is one greater than the rest, held in place and being tortured. She talks with Snips' soul while there, but Snails summons hers back, and she makes it back to meet Locker. Soon after, Stygius' sister Tenebra shows up to bring him back to the Bat Pony Kingdom, where he is a prince, and their father wants him back. He was only supposed to be gone a few hours after all, just long enough to sleep with Blackjack. It's been days. Psycho Shy goes with him, having developed a bit of a relationship and needing a new life after her old one had been comprehensively destroyed. Xand goes off in a new group with the Griffin Ghoul Carrion, the immortal Necromancer Snails, and the now lucid glowing one Silver Spoon. Blackjack, Lacuni, and Rampage return to Chapel, where Scotch is largely recovered, and P21 is getting better. Glory is pissed the hell off at Blackjack for what she saw as her infidelity with Stygius, and for making a radio broadcast about it to half the wasteland. But they patch things up a bit with Blackjack trying to explain she didn't understand Glory's viewpoint at all, but agreeing to give monogamy a chance, and give Glory more control in the relationship, including that she wouldn't run off again, or put herself in danger without Glory's okay. That part predictably doesn't last long. I think it's about here that Scotch gets her cutie mark, a Freemason symbol, upon her role in rebuilding Chapel, after flooding and getting a working sewer/outhouse system built. Glory's mom, Dawn, arrives in Chapel and takes Blackjack off alone, and basically spends a lot of time talking to her about the wasteland, making things better, and such. Then she gives an ultimatum to give her EC-1101, or she'll destroy Chapel by shelling it with a tank she's brought. Blackjack caves, but P21 had activated her broadcaster and they were listening in on everything, and Chapel comes in to fight Dawn and the Harbingers. Glory's dad and some Thunderhead Enclave are there as well, and he almost convinces Dawn to leave the Harbingers and return to him and Thunderhead, but she ends up refusing, attacking him. Along the way, Caprice, who had taken up in Chapel after being forced out of flank, uses her dying breaths to tell Blackjack that they'd put Deus's brain in the tank in that battle, and Blackjack uses that knowledge to get it to stop and instead to try doing better like the hero he used to be. But in fighting Deus, Blackjack broke her legs again, and they need to return to Rover to get them fixed. He does, and in fact, uses some Enclave power armor to reinforce them, so she'll be slower and less stealthy but more durable. But he needs her to do something for him now. Go to Grimhoof Army base and deal with the people they're using cybernetics to control hellhounds and use them as soldiers. The team goes there and frees them, temporarily teaming up with Lancer against Lighthooves, who in addition to being involved with the cybernetic control thing was grabbing a bunch of cruise missiles from the base. On leaving, Blackjack's team is ambushed by the Remnant, with Lancer insisting his father the Legate now do battle with and kill the Maiden of Stars. He says the time isn't right, but beats on her in order to save face with the Remnant, but at one point Blackjack is doing relatively well, and Lancer shoots her in the head, but she's saved by the bullet hitting and being stopped by one of her cybernetic eyes. This leads the Legate to call off the fight and back off, and Glory in replacing Blackjack's destroyed eye uses one from one of the Brood of Koyotl, the Legate's cybernetic soldiers. It matches the Equestrian Project Steel Pony parts perfectly. The Brood weren't independently developed by the Zebrazor. Based on Steel Pony, they are Steel Pony. So now Blackjack needs to make a decision about whether to handle the Legate or Lighthooves first. She goes with Lighthooves, since it seems like the Legate will be taking his time with whatever is going on. But in order to deal with him, they'll need a way to get to Thunderhead. That means a side trip to the Society to borrow Fancy Pants' old airship, the Fleur. While there, they meet Grace and Charm, Splendid's two sisters. Each has different ideas of what the society should be like after Awesome dies. Splendid wants it to expand, becoming more powerful, and bringing peace and prosperity to Hoofington. Grace wants to reform the serf system. Charm is a little shit with no vision except her own self-aggrandizement. Within the party, there are likewise divisions, with Glory roughly lining up with Splendid and P21 wanting to free the serfs. Blackjack mostly just wants things to stay stable, while she deals with bigger issues. Anything with the society could be dealt with later after all, but let's P21 look around and see how the serfs were being treated. Then Awesome dies and appoints Blackjack as his heir. Of course, she can't stick around there and intends to appoint one of Awesome's children as her regent. She goes with Grace, which P21 likes, even if it's not full emancipation now, and Splendid agrees to stick around as co-regent and advisor. Charm splits, destroying Awesome's impressive collection of memory orbs along the way. Deus is left to guard and keep the peace in the society. During this time, personal stuff has been going on as well, with the goddess taking ever more and stronger control of Blackjack, and Glory having sex with Splendid with Blackjack's encouragement. Lancer tries to kill Blackjack, explaining he'd been exiled from the Remnant for his interference, but she stops him as he gets distracted by her being in heat, and accuses her of using unicorn magic to influence him. He's captured. After the Grand Galloping Gala / Blackjack's coronation, Glory, Blackjack, and P21 have a threesome. Blackjack wakes up completely under the goddess's control and is taken to Maripony, where she's to make sure everything with the handoff of the Black Book goes off well, and then to become the new memory dump after Locuni gets full. Shit goes down, and Blackjack ends up nearly dying in the explosion. After having talked with Trixie and Twilight within Unity, Locuni has likewise survived, and then returns all the memories in her to their original bodies, extinguishing her existence as Locuni. Twilight then takes over the body for a while. Blackjack leaves and gets picked up by her friends, and they drop off Lancer after he tells them about how he thinks something is wrong with his father, and that the legate has betrayed the Remnant. Then they go on their way to Thunderhead. On the way, they are intercepted by an Avero Enclave armada led by General Storm Chaser, who wants to secure the surrender of Thunderhead, with this operation prompted by revelations related to Lighthooves' plans with the Raider disease. Blackjack can't agree to just help them, since she wants to prevent bloodshed all around, and will instead be trying to get Thunderhead to deal with Lighthooves on its own. She goes off with her friends to Thunderhead to try to contact the people in charge, but in the night Dawn kills them and frames Blackjack and company. They mostly end up captured, and Glory, still in Rainbow Dash body, is slated for execution. Blackjack escapes her cell after seeing a memory orb which indicates that the reason a bunch of useful orbs scattered around the wasteland are there is because Pinky, in the last days, had a giant overdose on party time mintles and arranged for all of them to be made and placed where they needed to be based on the combination of Pinky sense and the overdose, and freeze Scotch and P21. Also joining up with Rampage, they meet up with Mayor Duwell, Rainbow Dash, who has lived as a ghoul the last couple hundred years, operating out of Thunderhead, and behind the basics of the Raider disease plan to destabilize the Enclave, but she didn't know that Lighthooves had changed the disease, so that it would infect Pegasi as well. This means it's not just a bluff, and it really could kill tens of thousands of Enclave Pegasi. Rainbow says she'll deal with Lighthooves, but first gets Blackjack, P21, and Scotch to where they need to be to free Glory. They do, in the middle of her execution by Navarro Enclave in the middle of Thunderhead, helped by a riot sparked by Glory's joke ending just in time for the crowd to see that the Pegasus they were going to execute wasn't Rainbow Dash, while Blackjack also made a big public point about Lighthooves betraying the Enclave and making a call for unity between Thunderhead and the rest against Lighthooves. But Lighthooves hijacks the speech, inciting a riot against the outside Enclave, and leading to the Armada beginning a real attack. Glory and the rest go to her old advisor in the confusion, while Blackjack heads to Storm Chaser's flagship to get her to stand down. Doesn't work, and Storm Chaser is also relieved of command for trying to take a moderate line. Blackjack is sent to Shadowbolt Tower, to deal with things her way. She finds it's really well defended by a bunch of Thunderhooders loyal to Light Hooves who have been upgraded with Steel Pony augmentations, and ends up deciding to take on the burden of further augmenting herself in order to reach the top where Light Hooves was. It's traumatic for her, and she also discovers she's pregnant by P21. She'd digested her contraceptive implant, like she did bullets and such, and decides not to have the embryo aborted, even though her new set of augmentations, fully enclosing her body, won't allow it to grow a few months down the line and she'll need to get a surrogate. After getting the next routing location of EC1101, Robronco HQ, straight down in the core, she confronts and beats Light Hooves, and in order to keep the Enclave from taking and using his stock of bioweapons, she has to set off a mega spell in Shadow Bolt Tower, the one she'd seen the ghoul unicorns operating in the tunnels beneath the city when Scotch got traumatized by the giant factory monster. She had been evacuating people along the way, including a stable of unicorns within Shadow Bolt Tower, which she suggested go to 99 along with Strahlenhoof's Steel Rangers. Blackjack and Boo fall into the core. Time skip, during which we see, via Blackjack's use of the Perceptitron, a machine for viewing what's happening to someone wearing a Pip-Buck, how people have been reacting to the fall of Shadow Bolt Tower, Thunderhead, and the disappearance of security. People are weirded out by the Harbingers and the Remnant, who are both growing in number, but not doing much, and the Reapers are rebuilding. Reforms are happening in the society, the Enclave is falling apart, that's due to Little Pip, not anything in Hoofington, and Sunshine and Rainbows has happened. Glory is figuring stuff out about innovation rings and innovation. Dawn is replaced by Steel Rainer's Cognitum's second in command / head of the Harbingers, due to obvious disloyalty. Then Rampage joins Blackjack and Boo in the core. They make their way around, and Blackjack discovers that Rampage is working with Steel Rain, making her the friend who had betrayed her that Dawn had told her about in Thunderhead. She, Boo, and Rampage encounter the Legate, who is after Boo, because Discord has been living in her head since Hippocratic, and the Legate's been stymied by Discord for millennia. Real grudge there. They escape, and then Blackjack confronts Rampage, who kind of goes off on her own. Blackjack talks with Discord about stuff, the nature of good and evil and chaos and order and harmony, but they get separated. Blackjack has a brief dream encounter with Luna, who seems pretty nice, but I don't think Blackjack really picks up on the fact. She goes to confront Cognitum, who by this time, is clearly a poor mental copy of Luna stored in a shoddy knockoff of a Crusader mainframe. Lots of talking, trying to get Blackjack to join her side. Doesn't go for it, then gets shut down by the dealer / Echo, who has also been working for Cognitum, because the mega spell binding his soul to EC1101 also causes his soul to fade over time, and only a necromancer can reverse that, and that meant originally someone working for Luna, now Snips, who is still kind of alive, and under the control of Cognitum, lacking a soul entirely as was seen. With it being present in the vortex all that time ago, Blackjack learns about Horizons, and how it's a facility on the moon, meant to launch a gigantic moonstone at the Tocomare / Eater of Souls in the Hoofington core, which Cognitum intends to capture using the city's magical shields and use, with Mr. Horse's discovery of a reverse annihilation reaction that eliminates moonstone and increases the mass of star metal to restore and enlarge the Tocomare, which will provide energy to power a new Hoofington and Equestria under a new lunar rule, with the intent that it be a techno-utopia. Problem is Cognitum is insane and lacks both empathy and morality, to say nothing of the capacity for self-assessment to see all the problems with her that would make her unacceptable to Blackjack. Blackjack is put into her cloned body from Hippocratic, and Cognitum's mind is transferred into Blackjack's old body. Then Cognitum has Snips transfer Blackjack's QT mark, which she believes gives her a talent for victory itself, to her. Discord shows up, returns Snips' soul to his body, does some other things, and goads Cognitum into asking him to put Luna's soul into her, Blackjack's old body, which he does, a final act, before he's used up all his power and vanishes as dust in the wind. The Legate shows up, and it seems he's been working with Cognitum and Steel Rain. He's troubled by Discord's presence, but upon consultation with the stars, believes nothing important has changed. Blackjack's mind is transferred into the mainframe to keep her out of trouble, and the tank with her cloned body is pushed over a ledge. The Legate and Steel Rain destroy the mainframe after Cognitum leaves to head to the moon, which she needs to do, because the timing of when Horizons fires needs to be very specific for the Moonstone to be captured by the shields instead of directly impacting the Tocomare and just causing a huge explosion. Blackjack's mind is transferred to Charm's brain, which had been in connection with the mainframe as she was another of Cogs's prisoners in a jar. Charm escapes, and with the help of Snips, Horse, and maybe someone else she's able to get, Snips to a point where he can use the power of the Tocomare to summon Blackjack's soul, which is bound to her new body, bringing both up to them where they can transfer her mind to that body. Snips dies for real in the process, and Blackjack has a final confrontation with Steel Rain. The Legate had left to rejoin the Remnant and the Brood, who will be launching an attack on the city soon as part of a multi-sided plan in which everyone was betraying each other, killing him because he's a pathological backstabber. She escapes the core with Charm, who is in bad shape but still alive, through a portal in Golden Blood's OIA office which takes them to the Redoubt, which is the Bat Pony Kingdom under Black Pony Mountain, and kind of in a shadow world largely unaffected by things that happen outside. There she meets up with Psycho Shy / Whisper and Stygius, and eventually gets taken to Golden Blood's cell there, where he'd locked himself in 2 centuries ago. She has to go through a memory orb based security system to get to him, which reveals that the Legate was behind the Little Horn massacre, some things about Golden Blood and Twilight in the aftermath of Shattered Hoofridge leading to the creation of Gardens, and Golden Blood causing Pink his overdose, after having a breakdown having realized that he'd been manipulated by the Eater of Souls in creating Horizons. She gets through, learns some more stuff about his execution, and how he became a Canterlot ghoul, and tried to reconcile with Fluttershy before she became a tree, then was taken to the Redoubt, and how the point of Horizons was to basically destroy Equestria if it turned out Luna took over and became a tyrant. Then she decides she needs to leave the Bat Ponies and get back to her friends, stop Cognitum and Horizons and such, fights the Bat Pony King, leading to the kingdom re-emerging in the real world. She leaves, going to the Collegiate to get Charm medical attention, but has trouble convincing anyone she's security, gets by selling some of her stuff, then confronts the Professor / Silver Stripe, who had been a traitor to Equestria in the war, and was working for Cognitum now, or maybe the Legate, or both. Fight happens, and Blackjack's not doing the best what with being in her new unaugmented body. Then Calamity and Velvet walk in, and Calamity saves Blackjack by killing Silver Stripe. She convinces him and Velvet that she is Blackjack by talking about her time with Little Pip and Tenpenny, which had been removed from Little Pip's memory and never made it into the book of Little Pip. So they start work on setting up a meeting at Blue Blood Manor for all the groups in Hoofington to decide if they should fight against Cognitum and the Legate. Blackjack is taken back to Chapel, where she meets up with her old group, minus Rampage, who is hanging with Cognitum full time now. Glory is pissed, even if she gets a bit better after Blackjack convinces her she's not another imposter. There've been a few. Glory breaks up with Blackjack in what seems a poorly timed decision, and P21 comforts her before they rejoin Little Pip's crew and head over to the manor, where she convinces everyone of who she is and gets them all on her side for the coming war. She goes off to make a final appeal to the Highlanders and Hellhounds, and a stop at Miramar where she gets some of the Harbingers on her side, headed by the one that had passed her by at Happy Horn, who P21 then identifies as one of her apists. Blackjack finally gets an IF-88 Iron Pony and a memory orb that finally confirms that Rampage isn't just an amalgamation of souls and memories, but is based on a single definite personality, Twist's daughter, conceived in her 8 by Doof, Peppermint. And so they get ready to stop Cognitum before she can go to the moon, plus a bunch of other objectives for the Battle of Hoofington. Some of it is protecting as many civilians as possible after they'd been evacuated to strongholds at various places in the area, and keeping ponies out of the core, which had just stopped killing anyone who tried to enter, and Blackjack and Golden Blood identified as almost certainly a trap, but the offensive goals not featuring Blackjack were to destroy 3 bunkers in the area housing the Legate's Trees of Life and Steel Pony augmentation machinery. Since with them, he could endlessly reprocess dead brood into new ones. The Reapers have one task force for a bunker, Zang's group another, and the Zodiacs the last. Blackjack and crew are to go to the Lunar Space Center to keep Cognitum from launching, and then to go to the moon themselves to stop Horizons. Blackjack, P21, Scotch, Glory, and Boo go to the Space Center, and along the way, meet the 3 surviving members of the cursed Starcattery tribe of the Zebras other than the Legate. They tell them what the Legate was really planning, which was to end all life on the planet, and then go around doing the same on every other world, until no life was left in the universe. The Starcattery's oracle checks on this, and takes it at face value after again confirming that Blackjack is who she says she is, and has the potential to really change things up, being associated with the Fool or the Trickster in Tarot. So the Starcattery leave them, and give them some help getting where they need to go. At the command center for the Space Center, it seems one of them will need to stay back to protect the place until the rockets are ready to launch in case the Brood attack. Cognitum takes off after rebuffing a challenge by Blackjack, and Blackjack's team now needs to get on one of the other rockets to stop her on the moon. The Brood and the Legate try to stop this, even calling in a balefire strike on the place, when it seems like he might not be able to stop them otherwise. Blackjack, P21, and Scotch get on a rocket that had originally seemed disabled and destroyed, having been encased in ice following a cryogenic fuel problem, but it thawed and ended up being fine. Glory had to stay behind in the command center as the Brood were actively attacking, and she needed to make sure the rocket would launch. Heartfelt goodbyes are said, and the rocket is away just in time to avoid the balefire bomb which engulfs the Space Center, with Glory still in it. On the way to the moon, everyone's not in great shape over the loss of Glory, and Blackjack checks in on various people with the Perceptitron, and Scotch does the same, some of which suggests Glory might still be alive. On the moon, they confront Rampage and Blackjack ends up purging her of the Angel of Death. But along the way Blackjack's had a lot of stuff go on, like overusing the Perceptitron, getting her horn damaged, almost hitting burnout, and using uncontrolled mind magic on Rampage. Then she uses the Perceptitron one more time on the way to the Astros table, which causes her to have a stroke. She gets betterish though, and insists on helping the others deal with Cognitum, even if she's having some hallucinations and uncontrollable flashes to people in the battle due to some kind of interaction between everything she's been doing with her mind and the Moonstone and the Perceptitron. When they get to the Lunar Palace, they first have to deal with some of Cognitum's nooks, and they have a telepathic conference with Tom, the star spirit bound to Tom. The giant Moonstone projectile Horizons will be launching at the core in under an hour. Tom insists that the Eater of Souls must die, regardless of what that will do to everyone currently living on Equus. The Ponas say that's not really acceptable, and they think they can save everyone, and at the very least quarantine the Eater, and the planet won't need to slowly die as the Eater sucks in the life force of a lot of the things that die there, because they can search out the innovation rings and once someone activates Gardens of Equestria, the replenishment rate will get better anyway. Tom agrees to let them try, but of course it could well end up a moot point as Horizons is still going to go off at that point. They try to stop it, and confront Cognitum directly, which ends with Blackjack doing mind magic on her old body, and talking with Luna's soul, as distinct from Cognitum's mind, and they come to an accord which seems to result in the erasure or expulsion of Cognitum's mind from that body and the transfer of Blackjack's to it. I believe that the situation is now Blackjack's old body, with its augmentations, has her QT mark, which had for a short while been transferred to the clone along with her soul, but was separated from it by snips way back when and reattached to the old body, Blackjack's mind, and Luna's soul. The clone body has no QT mark and no mind, but Blackjack's soul. But it's not completely clear. Blackjack's body then becomes that of a true Alicorn princess, complete with real wings and a different spectral mane than Cognitum had. Though Cognitum is defeated, P21 is trapped and dying, and stays behind to continue delaying Horizons, as long as possible as the others retreat to the launch site along with Bastard, one of Cognitum's people who had switched sides. Rampage has to get left behind as well, due to mechanical problems and Blackjack's inability to teleport with people. Depending on what happened when Horizons went off, she could end up living in the Astros table, or endlessly wandering the surface of the moon, blind and in agony as her body is continuously ravaged by the vacuum of space. On the way home, Blackjack is showing signs of not really being herself anymore, what with having Luna's soul now instead of her own. The battle is going rough, but all 3 bunkers are taken out. Stygius proposes to Whisper on the battlefield, leading to her singing a song, which due to the connection of musical numbers in Equestria to harmony the legate sees as a threat. This prompts him to show up and kill Stygius. Then he's in the core and broadcasting footage to the rest of the wasteland. He does some things to open up the sky over Hoofington, then uses the mecha sprites to massacre a ton of refugees in the core. This prompts Tenpenny to use Celestia 1 on the core, but the shields have been reconfigured to pump that energy right into the Eater of Souls, which is raised up to the level of the city. About the same time, Lancer, Whisper, Zenith, and one of the Star Category temporarily subdue the legate, and Velvet cuts his soul jar heart from his body using the Star Metal Sword, which causes all the accumulated growth and healing and damage from thousands of years to happen at once, making the legate become a giant flesh monster which falls from the building to the Eater below. And in about the same scene, Whisper starts another song, which through the help of homage is transmitted all across Equestria, with many thousands joining in the harmony, which I think helped to lessen the power of the Eater / its rise / the innovation in the core. And that's about where we are now, with Blackjack soon to land in Hoofington. Here the first part of Icy Shake's summary ends. Before we begin the second part, we shall take a short break to read the comments. I knew the story was bad. I did not know it was that bad. Seriously, how did Somber think any of that moon shit was a good idea? Holy fuck dude, I really appreciate that. This is great. Here's a spreadsheet I came across some time ago with short information about all characters and weapons, zebra tribes, and projects that have appeared throughout the story. You might find it useful in your quest to get a better idea of the story without reading a million words. I spent about 5 minutes writing something before I realized how little I actually remembered about certain parts of the story. If I were you, I'd just skim a few of the chapters, because finding a detailed timeline or summary would be a considerable amount of work. Generally speaking, Blackjack continues to struggle with a self-punishing mentality as she deals with continuing problems. Sanguine, who may have seemed important in chapter 37, is pretty much a pawn compared to the villains later in the story. Most of part 3 is Blackjack being with characters aside from her normal friends, and trying to fix some of her self-destructive tendencies. Part 4 sees the creation of new villains, particularly Dawn, Morning Glory's mother, and ends the Enclave and the Goddess storyline in a manner I found satisfactory. I felt like part 4 was more clear and enjoyable than part 3, but this could simply be a product of my lack of a complete memory of the details of older events. Part 5 begins the story by showing the events of characters other than Blackjack, while she is out of the big picture for a considerable time due to actions from part 4. The true puppet masters behind the hoof are revealed, and Blackjack goes through a series of emotional defeats, while pieces move across the board and others are taken off it for good. Personal opinion rant warning. Things quickly come together to culminate in the final fight, end all be all, battle for the hoof and the attention of its readers. I feel 2 points certainly about the most recent chapters of Project Horizons. The over-the-top level of things and the self-hate that is expressed by multiple characters. Several different characters go into the "it's all my fault, I wasn't good enough, I failed Equestria" mantra that Blackjack has expressed multiple times through the story, and I find myself thinking, okay, I get it, just move on, the point has been made. Secondly, the actual final battle for Hoofington itself is ridiculous. I feel like Storm Chaser, one of the ponies who helps to direct the good guys, was possessed by Hitler and decided to let all her troops get surrounded as much as possible on the idea that certain places of interest from the past in the novel have invincible plot shields. The effect is like watching Stalingrad happen over and over with a different side character replacing the German army every time. On a detailed level, all these battle scenes that make up the final battle are flashy and overly done. No enemy can be just some enemy. There always has to be hordes of Cyber Zebra Death Uber killing commandos or something like that. And when the characters fight, I don't feel so much as adversaries are in combat as much as I'm just getting special effects and cool battle scene stuff thrown at my face. End of rant. However, Somber isn't some military junkie who would know why 2-barrel tanks don't work, or how the 6th Army died at Stalingrad, and Project Horizons remains one of my favorite FOE fics in what can be described as a love-hate relationship. It's not over yet, but is getting very close, and I'm sure on its completion people will put out dedicated summaries and reviews. If you want to know any specifics, I'm sure I could try my best. TLDR. Blackjack mopes a lot, and I forgot certain parts of the story, because I'm an idiot. Thanks. Don't worry about forgetting something. Hell, I forgot parts of Pink Eyes, and that's a pamphlet in comparison to PH. I think this picture adequately explains Project Horizons. There is a point where we needed to stop, and we have clearly passed it, but let's keep going, and see what happens. Yeah, that's gotta be a pain in the ass to really drill down the complex fuckery that Somber created. But in an extremely critical point, the big bad is an eldritch abomination called the Eater of Souls, summoned by the Legate/Dragon Ball Zebra with the help from his clone cybernetic army of Zebra soldiers called the Brood of Coatl. Shit happens. Blackjack dies again, and gets upgraded to a Cyber Alicon, and later a hybrid Cyber Alicon, by fusing her soul with Luna. As of the last few chapters, Glory died, and then came back for whatever unfathomable fucking reason. P21 is perma-killed, Rampage is stuck on the moon, and Lakuni was Sam, who killed Pinkie Pie, who was presumed dead, but is now alive. Oh, and red herring, was that the secondary big bad of this whole adventure was a fucking mind print of AI Luna who was disguised as an assistant to Golden Blood called Eclipse. All in all, it completely broke canon, caused a ton of flame wars, and killed what was an awesome adventure. Hope this helped. If not, well then you've got an opinion piece. I appreciate all input, whether it be heavily biased, strictly factual, or somewhere in the many shades of grey in between. I have other points I'd address, but that'd be an essay on its own, and would diverge the topic. So a summary was created before, and Icy Shake did a nice job, but the story has now been completed and finished. Any chance for another update after the Legate becomes a giant flesh monster? Can someone summarize the rest? I'll see what I can do. Same caveat as before, mostly top of the head, so there might be some mistakes. Blackjack/Luna lands and makes her way to the Collegiate, where she believes Glory to be. Unfortunately, though some of the Brood are now pacified, others are continuing to fight despite the Legate no longer directly controlling them. Some absorb souls and begin to take on the personality of the person the soul belonged to in life. On the way to the Collegiate, Blackjack runs into the robot CMC, and Sweetie Bot suggests using EC1101 to take control of the Eater, kind of along the lines of Cognitum's plan. At the Collegiate, Blackjack finds that Glory is in fact still alive, but only intermittently awake, and in severe pain. She's been coordinating a few things, including the preparation to have a surrogacy spell performed to transfer Blackjack's children from her Alicorn body to Princess Grace's, and a plan to destroy the Eater, while preventing the destruction of the Hoofington region in the Star Metal Moonstone Annihilation reaction. The Legate had set up the City's Fade generators such that they would capture Tom and funnel him to the Eater to be consumed. Glory's plan is to destroy the inner ring of generators that were to hold Tom in place, but leave the outer ring intact, which would cause most of the energy released by the reaction to be directed upwards into space. Glory and Blackjack share a final goodbye, and then Glory dies. Now, throughout this, Luna's soul has been changing Blackjack physically and mentally, and she's slipping between her own mind and an emerging Luna's being at the forefront. This continues here, and during part of the continuing battle with the Brood, the SBP hub tower, thus Little Pip, is brought over to allow Little Pip to control the weather in Hoofington, which she uses to wipe out many of the hostile Brood. The Eater increases the innovation field in response to the presence of Celestia's soul, which, along with Luna's, was a fragment of the star which had sacrificed itself to stop the Eater thousands of years before, when the Star Cattery Zebras had tried to raise it, nearly sucking it out of the hub, and forcing Little Pip to withdraw. Blackjack deals with emotional issues for a while, as preparations for the final assault on the core are made. She meets up with everyone at the entrance to the underground tunnels that had been such a problem months before, when Scotch had developed her phobia and Glory had lost her wing. She selects a strike team to go with her: Whisper, Dusk, Ares, Lancer, Psalm, Crumpets, and Sweetie Bot. Pythia stowed away with them. They ride the rails down to the core, fighting horrors along the way. They get to the gigantic zebra monster Leggett and need to destroy the 4 fragments of his soldier heart scattered throughout his body. After doing so, he's still alive, in fact taking on a new, smaller but more dangerous form through the support of the Eater. Blackjack gets him to say that the Eater needs him, has always needed him, which leads to the Eater, whose ego must never be challenged, to revoke his assistance, effectively killing the Leggett at last. Ares and Lancer have died by this point, and everyone else, but Blackjack is in too poor shape to continue with her. Whisper in particular lost her wings, and refused Hydra, because of what it might do to her baby, and are teleported away by Psalm. As she rises to the platform where she will face the Eater, Blackjack once again finds herself face to face with the dealer, who, it seems, wasn't just Echo after all. He could be her crazy, he could be the spirit of the wasteland, he could be something else, but he's there. And he gets her to talk a bit more about her Cutie Mark story, where she reveals that Hatches and she had played a game at the end to decide who would leave their cards group first to take the heat if caught. Blackjack lost, but whined enough that Hatches went anyway, leading to her getting crushed in the malfunctioning door and dying. The dealer suggests that Blackjack's talent was never victory at all, but death, and she brings death to everyone around her, friend and foe, innocent and guilty alike. Note here that Big Daddy originally saw blood and stars when looking at Blackjack, but saw only blood when looking at Cogjack, who had Blackjack's Cutie Mark, and only stars when looking at Blackjack in her clone body. And so Blackjack reaches the platform where the Eater is, and the Fate generators are. She needs to destroy the inner 6, and gets to work on that using a shotgun with special moonstone laced ammunition to destroy the star metal casing on them. There's some physical fighting she needs to do along the way, but the more interesting and arguably serious challenge is being put into a series of dreams to keep her from trying to do her mission. The first puts Blackjack in an alternate version of Stable 99 where after Deus's attack, the Overmare was ousted and Jinrumi took over. Blackjack had been in a coma the whole time, and everything she'd experienced was based on stories about the strange new people the stable was interacting with, now that it had been opened. Having realized that there was no way that, as the dream showed, her mother would free the males and end the breeding program, and based on Luna's knowledge of dreams, Blackjack knew she needed to find a way to completely reject the dream, ending it at a fundamental level. She did this by once again activating the chlorine talisman, killing her own stable as she had before. The next dream had Luna in her study, before signing a peace treaty with the zebras, working on her stories of Little Pip and Blackjack and the Wasteland. She's taken to the signing ceremony, where the terms extracted from the zebra, which had been approved by Celestia, were shown to be increasingly punitive. When the term, that each year a number of zebra foals would be sent to Equestria to be re-educated, so that no lies about Luna would ever take root in the zebra lands again. Luna knew it was something Celestia would never insist on or accept, and rejected the dream by refusing to sign the treaty, instead ordering the continuation of the war until absolute conquest of the Zebra Nation had been achieved. The last full dream was a sort of follow-on to the Lucidity simulation, and tried to convince Blackjack she was just a security mayor/police mayor who had suffered a mental break following her failure to save a child's life. She determined it was false after the Sanguine of the dream was unable to give her a real name for the stallion she knew as P21. Then she just brute forced her way out of the dream, calling on Luna's dream powers. So, most of the inner fate generators have been destroyed, but the moonstone bullets have been weakening as they were converted to star metal. On the last one, with Blackjack severely wounded, cut in half I think, the shot is a complete dud as the moonstone has been fully converted. Tom ends up captured, and is being converted to star metal before Blackjack remembers something Glory had told her, possibly prompted by actually seeing it exposed. She has a moonstone heart. Realizing or guessing that this wasn't some kind of metaphor, Blackjack tears it from her chest and uses it to break the last fate generator. With her power source gone and reserves depleting, it seems all is lost as, due to the way fate shields work, drawing energy from the things they are holding/blocking/whatever. Even without the generator, the shield was able to hold Tom in place. In her final act, Blackjack/Luna raises a small piece of the moon. Tom is raised above the inner Fade Shield's area of influence, causing it to fail, and then Blackjack lets him fall, to come into contact with and annihilate the Eater of Souls. As Blackjack lays dying, 3 souls briefly visit and comfort her with their presence, those of her mother, P21, and Glory. Then Luna's soul finally departs for the ever after. And there, on the wreckage of the platform, the mayor stared at the stars as the number reached 0. Darkness took her, and silence. Yet her lips curled in a smile as she felt hot liquid rolling down her cheeks. The rumbling grew, becoming her entire world, stretching into eternity.
A person's truth is so simple that most ignore it to concentrate on what they think are deeper truths.
You, for example, are simply unused to what it is to be liked by others.
You've never learned how to deal with fearing what others feel about you, and so you avoid it.
But don't the others hate me?
What are you, stupid? Haven't you realized it's all in your imagination, you mega dork?
But I hate myself.
One who truly hates himself cannot love. He cannot place his trust in another.
I'm a coward. I'm cowardly, sneaky, and weak.
No. Only if you think you are, but if you know yourself, you can take care of yourself.
I hate myself. But maybe I could love myself. Maybe my life would have a greater value. That's right. I am no more or less than myself. I am me. I want to be myself. I want to continue existing in this world. My life is worth living here.
Congratulations! Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations, cunt.
Congratulations! Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Congratulations!
Congratulations.
Thank you all. Oh, this is nice. This is the end. Okay. Where exactly am I? Here's the song. Oh, good. There's some things that are still unresolved here, guys. How do I get home? What do I eat? Was
Twist.
my mom or a clone or hell? Was this all in my mind? What's
A taco mare.
is that sort of a Freudian thing or am I real? Oh, hell. Does the bus run through here? I mean, I'd like to go home now, but oh god, where's home? Okay. I mustn't run away. Okay, I got that. Good. Okay. Now, if I were to run away, let's analyze that. Where the fuck would I go? I'm on a big
Cheese.
ball. Is this how you end?
Fanfic.
I mean, is this where we go from here? Okay, the
Epilogue.
better sure as hell make up for this. I'm telling you right now, because I'm stuck in nowhere land. You ran out of ink too, didn't you, you bastards?
Then comes the epilogue. It takes place 200 years after the events of Fallout Equestria and Project Horizons, starting out at a campfire near the Everfree Forest. Bunch of people there, and they are telling stories, and implicitly just finished the story of the security mayor. There's disagreement of if any of it ever happened, with the most credence given to it by Glimmershine, a unicorn mayor from the Lunar Commonwealth, the state encompassing the region of Hoofington, the most skepticism from a guy from the NCR. Anyway, get some further flashbacks, like Blackjack's daughter Bowilette and son Baccarat growing up in the old society as Grace's children by a dead nobleman, with Charm still alive, but with memory and maybe mental problems as a result of the trauma of ripping a bunch of wires out of her brain. Whisper, now a metal performer, and using a Bloodwind talisman to fly, taking her and Stygius's son Noctilucent to see Fluttershy, and telling her that she is her and Golden Blood's daughter, providing a letter he gave her as proof. Also in this segment, it's shown that Whisper is the new bearer of the element of magic, discovered as part of a thing where Apex, an Alicorn and potentially OM bearer, tried to use them, and the Gardens to make the wasteland all radiation, and taint to benefit the Alicorns instead of removing all that. Also something about an invasion of mutated dragons leading to a falling out between Spike and Little Pip. Revelation that Morning Star became a sort of tainted birthing abomination as part of her experiments, got put down. Okay, so with Blackjack now. First, Sweetie Bot invading her tomb, housing her Pip-Buck, and maybe her clone body at the time, to steal her Pip-Buck to see if it still had EC-1101. It didn't. She left the Star Metal Sword there though. Later, Blackjack wakes up and echoes the first chapter of the story, but twisted. She eventually realizes that it's not right, and the memories through the final confrontation with the Eater rush on her in an instant. She runs out of Stable 99 until meeting and being comforted by Sam. Back to the present. A unicorn talks with Glimmershine, asking to see her pistol, then doing some work on it as it's shown to be Vigilance, and that Glimmershine is a 12th generation descendant of Blackjack. The unicorn drops some comments about Glimmershine's mother, and says there's still some room for names on the pistol, and it would be a shame if she were the last to have it. Then Blackjack goes off to the ever-free forest to a glade where the remains of the SBP hub lie, basically powered down, along with the rest of the SBP now lost to the ravages of time, and without its shield, as Snails was brought in at some point to free Celestia's soul. Little Pip is still alive and meets Blackjack on the roof. They now kind of take care of each other, as some of the last people from the old days that each knows and Homage had asked Blackjack to make sure that Little Pip was looked after physically, emotionally, and sexually, or some such, now that she was gone. Boo shows up in the Ne'er-do-well costume and is starting to turn into a Draconequus. Similar things are happening to many of the Brood, but into a bunch of different forms. I think Hippogriff was one, not just Draconequi. Turns out Boo was behind a terrorist bombing in the NCR's capital. No indication anyone was hurt, in the interest of exposing some Twilight Society secret plot that was threatening the people's freedom in some way. Little Pip isn't happy, and seems barely restrained from killing her, saying she's a menace, and that someone will have to take her out eventually. But Boo delivers something to Blackjack and leaves. Blackjack reveals that she's there to ask Little Pip's help with something. Turns out it's taking them to the moon in the SBP hub room with her crazy levitation magic and the stuff Boo delivered. When they get there, it's also to use her finding people talent to get them to rampage. She gets them to the ruins of the old Astro stable, where outside they meet some moon ponies, probably blanks that have changed form, who take them to a sort of village, where there is a shrine sort of thing containing Rampage's body, the power of the Phoenix talisman having finally been exhausted. It falls to dust upon Blackjack touching it, and Blackjack just takes the talisman back to where she and Little Pip landed, before bringing out the Star Metal Sword, and breaking the talisman, releasing the non-peppermint souls within but also triggering one last activation, bringing a Philly Rampage to life. Then, after Twists and Shuja's souls leave, after lingering with their daughter one last time, they get ready to head home, completing Blackjack's promise to come back for her friend. Oh, also there was a lead into Fallout Equestria Homelands. Basically, Biffia, Scotch, and Magina discover an old dispatch from the Zebra Caesar about the Eye of the World, and decide to leave behind Chapel, which has been changing a lot, and which isn't really a home for Scotch or Magina after the deaths of their parents and dispersal of the Crusaders, and where they aren't taken seriously, to go to the Zebra Lands to investigate it. And he delivers. Thanks. I got halfway through the book myself, but then life happened. Props to you for reading 1.7 million words and vomiting it all back into a few concise Reddit posts. You want a summary of the ending? It's the worst, most poorly executed ending of any book in the Fallout Equestria series. You should just stop reading once they make it to the moon and come up with your own ending because, wow, Somber loses his shit at the end. The writing was rushed, poorly thought out, riddled with bad choices, and you can tell he totally went off his meds in the real world because, just, holy crap, the last few chapters are total crap compared to the previous body of work. He must have stopped listening to his editors in any form, or they just wanted to stop having to deal with it, so they just vomited out whatever came to mind, because what we got, just, steaming pile of shit. And there you have it folks. That was the end of Fallout Equestria, Project Horizons, the gigantic Fallout Equestria fanfiction that's more than twice as long as the work it was originally based upon. It also means this is the end of this video. I might do another one like it for another overly long fanfiction with an equally crazy plot, but I would have to find another such work first. Click the like button on this video and make comments on it or whatever, but don't subscribe to my channel because I hardly ever post any videos, and the ones I do post are usually shit. If this video inspires you to actually read the damn thing, a working link may or may not be in the description below. If this video fills you with righteous indignation because you're an avid Project Horizons fan and I've ruffled your feathers, then feel free to squawk at me in the comments section, implying I'll read them.